Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday, November the 24th, 2019. It is currently 4:47 p.m. Central Time. And well, I'm standing at the door of my church, Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas. I'm standing at the door because, well, it's a beautiful day outside. 72, 74 degrees. There's some cars driving by. It's a beautiful day. And I just pulled up in the car, opened the door, decided to stop, turn around, and hit record. Because as I was opening the door, a thought hit me. And the thought hit me based off a news article I read before I got in the car. I pulled up here, walked around, put my key, opened the door, and walk in. And you know what? When I walked in, there was no thought that, hope no one sees me. I could walk in and maybe the authorities are waiting on me to lock me up. And, maybe we should take that sign down that says Victory Baptist Church. And maybe I should, park down the street and then walk over to the building, make sure no one's around and sneak in because I'm fearful that I'm going to be arrested, that I'm going to be persecuted. No, I live in a country where I can pull up to a church that says church, walk through the door on a Sunday evening after being in this same building Sunday morning and be ready to once again open the scriptures, preach the scriptures, teach the scriptures, challenge ourselves about truth. I have complete freedom. I don't have to live in fear. And we sometimes, I think, especially as American Christians, we take that freedom for granted. Sometimes maybe we're not as thankful as we should. And to be honest, sometimes I don't think we take advantage of all the freedoms we have. I don't think we sometimes, we have the freedom to preach. We have the freedom to post sermons all over the internet. We have the freedom. Now, yes, there have been questions recently about, some videos being taken down from YouTube and some questions about what you can and cannot say in regards to certain sins. And that should bother us and that should disturb us because we want to protect the freedom of religion here in the United States for all religions, every religion. We want them to be able to proclaim whatever they believe to be true. We want them to be able to post messages condemning Christianity, mocking Christianity, saying whatever they want about Christianity, because the freedoms we want are the freedoms we must give to others. The freedoms we take away from others are freedoms that we ultimately take away from ourselves. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, as I indicated, there was a news article I read. It came from the BBC. I have it right here. And I'm going to share it with you because I think it's very, very powerful and it just deals with some of these issues. Here is the title of this news article. The Japanese Christians forced to trample on Christ. The Japanese Christians forced to trample on Christ. As soon as I saw that headline, I'm like, oh, wow, let me read a little bit about this. Here is how the story begins. Pope Francis arrived in Japan on Saturday ahead of a trip to Nagasaki to pay tribute to the victims of the atomic bomb dropped on the city during World War II. But he will also pay tribute to a lesser-known group of residents who hundreds of years ago were tortured and forced into hiding for their beliefs. All right. Now, Nagasaki, yes, we could talk a lot. We could talk, hours, everything that occurred there, the atomic bomb. But he paid tribute to a lesser-known group of residents who hundreds of years ago were tortured and forced into hiding for their beliefs. That paragraph is why I started this episode the way I did. I can just stand right here. I can go back to the door. I'm not going to open it again, but I can go back to this door you can't see. But I can just stand there. I can stand there holding a Bible as cars drive by. No, there's no controversy. There's no problems. We can put a sign. I can right here and record an episode promoting Christianity and post it on the internet. As I was driving here, I was listening to Christian radio that airs here in the local area. Those are freedoms. But throughout history, there have been many who did not have such freedoms. There have been many who've been persecuted for their beliefs. There have been many who had to hide. And here's a group of individuals that hundreds of years ago were tortured and forced into hiding for their beliefs. Now, the article continues. A man waits nervously in line to be called. When he hears his name, he steps forward, watched closely by local and government officials from the capital, who have been sent down especially for the occasion. In front of the man is a small bronzed image fixed with the image of Jesus Christ on the cross. The man is told to step on it. If he does, it's a public declaration that he has given up his faith and he will live to see another day. If he doesn't, he could face execution, crucifixion, or torture. He could be forced into boiling hot springs or suspended upside down in a pit of excrement. Wow. Now this is something that happened in history, not something just made up. Let me read this again. A man waits nervously in line to be called. When he hears his name, he steps forward, watched closely by local and government officials from the capital, who have been sent down specially for the occasion. In front of the man is a small bronzed image fixed with the image of Jesus Christ on the cross. The man is told to step on it. If he does, it's a public declaration that he has given up his faith, and he will live to see another day. If he doesn't, he could face execution, crucifixion, or torture, forced into boiling hot springs, or suspended upside down in a pit of excrement. Any sign of hesitation could cost him his life. The practice of stepping on Christian images is known as fumie. It was widespread in the city of Nagasaki in the 17th century. Fumie, it's spelled F-U-M-I-E, fumie. And the practice is stepping on a Christian image. They place a Christian image before you. You step on it to demonstrate, no, I am renouncing my faith. I am literally dishonoring this. I'm showing I don't care for it. I'm trampling Jesus under my feet. And I'm doing so in order to preserve my physical life, to save myself from physical torture, suffering, pain, and death. What a horrific situation to be put into. What a horrific situation to find yourself. And how grateful I am that I was able to pull up in my car, walk around, just stand there at the door, watching cars drive by. No concern that anybody would see me. Just nice weather, just standing there. No concern. It breaks my heart that others have had to live through this. And let me say this. Let's just be very... This needs to be stated, and sometimes it makes Christians mad when I say these things. We should not want anyone of any faith to suffer persecution and death. People of many faiths have suffered persecution and death for what they believe. We want people to have freedom. Freedom to be wrong. Freedom to be right. Freedom to proclaim the truth. Freedom to proclaim error. We want that because, again, the rights we deny others are rights we will ultimately deny ourselves. Let's continue with some more information about this entire situation. This section in this article is called A Wicked Religion. Nagasaki, an important port city, was first introduced to Christianity around 1560. All right? They were first introduced to Christianity around 1560. If you hear that clicking, it's me going back to the article to my recording software just to make sure it hasn't stopped recording. So let's go back. This section is called A Wicked Religion. Nagasaki, an important port city, was first introduced to Christianity around 1560 when Jesuit missionaries from Portugal began arriving in Japan. The Portuguese Empire was at the time one of the largest maritime empires in the world, with bases everywhere from Africa to Asia. The Jesuit missionaries worked to convert the lords of the area, some of whom recognized that converting to this foreign religion could help them gain trade support from the Portuguese. Now, please stop. No, right there. Now, the people can convert to Christianity for many reasons. Some do so for economic reasons, societal reasons. That's always horrible. Well, some of them converted because they thought it would help them with trade and foreign relations, all right? Many peasants under these lords would also be made or influenced to convert to the religion, and by the early 17th century, the town had become the Rome of Japan. All right, so they became the Rome of Japan. Now, again, please note, it's kind of insinuated that many of the peasants kind of felt forced to convert. You don't want that either. You don't want to force people to Christianity. You don't want to force. No, we want freedom. That's the lesson here. Nagasaki was basically established as a Christian city with parishes. Professor Kirk Paramore, professor of Asian Studies at the National University of Ireland, told the BBC, "Nowhere else in Japan was as Christian as Nagasaki was. At its peak, there were up to 500,000 people in Nagasaki that identified as Christian." The Portuguese arrived in Nagasaki during the 17th century, but over time, Japan's political authorities decided the rapid growth of the religion posed a threat to the central government. They decided to crack down. So for some reason, they perceived Christianity a threat to the government. All right? To the central government is how the article states it. Why did they perceive Christianity a threat to the central government? My history of this particular period of time is not sufficient for me to give you a definitive answer, but I do find that interesting that they perceived it a threat to the government. Now, I'm going to speculate here. This is pure speculation. I think in many cases, the way it should work is that Christians' loyalty is to Christ. Christians' loyalty is to heaven. They're not so much loyal to a particular nation. Their citizenship is in heaven. Now, if you understand Christianity, those Christians, even though they're not necessarily outwardly loyal and patriotic towards their particular country, because their loyalty is to Christ and their focus is on heaven, by looking at Christian morality and what is taught in the scriptures, they should be very good citizens. They should be striving to obey the law. They should be respectful to authority. They should be living lives that would be beneficial for society. But they could perceive that loyalty to Christ as a threat to loyalty to government. I can't say that's the case in this particular story, but it is interesting that the government decided to crack down. They continue. They were looking to get rid of Christianity, but they were also looking to remove the foreigners as a political threat to the security of the state. So the two things were related, said Mr. Paramore. Now, they blame it that this religion was brought in by foreigners. There were these foreigners coming in as Christian missionaries, and they perceived them to be a threat to security of the state. In the latter half of the 16th century, 26 foreign missionaries in Nagasaki were executed by crucifixion. This signaled the start... that's the 16th century. Make sure I got the number right. This signaled the start of what would end up being a long period of persecution against Christians. In 1614, a strict nationwide ban on Christianity was issued. Foreign missionaries were quickly expelled from the country. Those who refused to leave were arrested, killed, or forced to renounce the religion. Japan as a whole entered a period of isolation, cutting off almost all contact with other nations under the government of the time. Okay, now this section is called Tortured Over and Over Again. Around the 1620s, authorities decided it wasn't enough to get rid of the religious leaders. They had to come up with a public way to root out the religion from the hearts of the people. All right, they had to get rid of the religion from the hearts of the people. They were like, what do we do? How do we remove this religion from the hearts of the people? What's the solution? Well, let's see what they came up with. I think you already have an idea, but obviously it's not going to be good. The solution? The fumie. These were brass images, sometimes set in wooden boards, depicting either the Christ or Mary. Every single person that lived in Nagasaki was ordered to go through the practice of stepping on the fumie. Suma became an annual practice carried out at the start of each year. It was an obligation. They named some different groups. The commoners, the samurai, the Buddhist monks, even sick people couldn't miss it. Everybody had to see this. This was like, entertainment. It's that time of year for the fumie. Let's go down and watch what happens. They would bring the wooden board to their house. Every single person had to do this, said Martin Ramos, professor of Japanese studies at a university. Okay, the long title here, but we won't go through it. It was quite well thought out because at the time Christians relied a lot on images. People prayed in front of an image, Mary, Jesus. So many thought that part of the God was inside the image. It was a link to the divine. For them to tread upon this was something very fearful. Now, please note, throughout church history, throughout Christian history, you have sometimes some weird beliefs that become rooted in at a time. Obviously, we especially from our vantage point, we don't pray before images, and we definitely don't believe a part of God is inside the image or any way like that. But it still was, whatever they thought about the images, this still was a major thing because they were going to have to renounce their faith. So it's more than just what they thought was in the image. This was a renouncing of their faith publicly. All right, the article has an image of one of the a fumie, and it's a fumie with the face of Christ completely worn away. I mean, it's just sad. You can tell it's Christ on the cross, but you can't see anything on the face. I mean, the face is gone. All right? If you examine an original fumie closely, one poignant detail is that the face of Christ has been completely worn away, reminding us of the countless feet that would have been trampled on it. All right? So in other words, a whole lot of people, when forced with this situation, walked on the face of Christ. They stepped on the face of Christ because they did not want to suffer pain. They did not want to suffer death. And it's easy for me right here in the good old security of the United States of America, where I can stand at the door of my church as people drive by with no fear. No fear. I have no fear that someone's going to come in tonight and make me, my choice is walk on an image of Christ, to renounce my faith, or to suffer. I don't have to face that choice. So I can sit here sounding so spiritual. I can sit here sounding like how committed I am. It's easy to say that. I can't imagine being placed in that situation. But it's a situation that we all must, as Christians, at least consider. What would you do? What would you do if you were placed in the same situation? How would you respond? Now, this is what I like to challenge people on. First, be slow to just judge and condemn these people as well. I would be more committed than that. And B, before you say what you would do when you face death, Like, before you start bragging or saying, well, if I was going to face death, I know what I would do. I would stand for Christ. Before you brag about how you would make this, amazing stand and you're so brave, consider how committed you really are to Christ Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How many times the things of God take precedent over yourself, what you want, your flesh, your life, your plans. I think you can see sometimes the level of our commitment is seen more in our daily life than it is in facing some major crisis of faith, of whether we're going to renounce or not. Now let's just remember, we have in the New Testament the Apostle Peter making all kinds of big claims of what he was and wasn't going to do. And the next thing you know, he denied Jesus, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. Something to remember before we become all arrogant and talk about what we would do in these situations. So if you examine original Fumie closely, one poignant detail is that the face of Christ has been completely worn away, reminding us of all the countless feet that would have been trampled on it. And they quote a Professor Simon Hall, an expert in Japanese Catholicism at Nagasaki Catholic University. The Christians who refused to tread on the Fumie were killed, or more commonly tortured. They would sometimes torture them by hanging them over a pit filled with excrement. They would cut slits around their temples to release the pressure so they wouldn't die. And they got a picture here. So they hang them over a pit filled with excrement. They cut slits around their temples to release the pressure. So I guess they just kind of release them down in this pit. And they got a picture here. It looks not very good. It looks like many of them were hung upside down into the excrement. Wow. They're describing it. Christians were hung upside down in the pits filled with excrement. The main aim of the torture was not so much to kill those who refused, but to break their resolve. So that's why this would happen. Sometimes there was even a doctor present so that when a Christian being tortured looked likely to die, they would be nursed back to health before being tortured again. An estimated 2,000 people did eventually die as martyrs, refusing to renounce their faith. Please note, 2,000 died refusing their faith. Remember how many they said were in the city? Now, please note, we go back up. At the peak, 500,000 people identified as Christian, yet 2,000 die. Now, I cannot say if that's an accurate description of what happened, but from a circumstantial, just surface level look, that means very few would not deny their faith and died. Most, it seems, trampled on the Fumie and saved their life. That's what it looks like. Then it shows Jesuit missionaries beheaded in 1622, Nagasaki. Others pretended to renounce their faith, but still continued being Christians in secret. So some would say, I renounce my faith, walk on the Fumie, and then would go home and say, but I'm still a Christian. They would return home begging God to forgive them, said Mr. Hull. In one community, they would even burn the sandals they had worn, mixing the ashes with water before drinking it as an expression of their profound penitence. They eventually became known as hidden Christians. They give a Japanese term here, but that I am not familiar with. So if I try to pronounce it, it will sound like someone from Texas pronouncing a Japanese phrase. So no, we won't try. Hidden Christians. These people would still secretly practice things like baptism. They would give their children secret Portuguese Christian names. They would celebrate Nativity, Easter, said Mr. Ramos. And then they go on, and it goes a little bit. The Pope, to kind of return to how the article began, Pope Francis is expected to visit a memorial dedicated to the 26 martyrs. One of the paradoxes of Japanese Christianity history is that if all Japanese Catholics had refused to trample on the Fumie and instead chosen to die as martyrs, Christianity in Japan would also have died, said Mr. Hull. All right, so that's kind of interesting. That's kind of if everyone would have said, hey, I refuse to denounce my faith, and they would have all been killed. That would have probably ended Christianity. But what happened is many supposedly renounced their faith, went home and continued to practice and kept Christianity alive. Now, you could say, well, they did the right thing. I think it's best to say that the Bible clearly seems to say that we should never renounce our faith or deny our faith, and to deny our faith in Christ. The Bible seems to imply if we deny him, he will deny us. If we confess him, he will confess us. It's a very serious warning about this. I think here's the thing, that even in our failure, even when we are weak, even when we deny our faith, God can use that denial, use that failure for his purpose and his glory to further Christianity alone. Remember, he used Peter, even though Peter denied him 3 times. He can use us when we fail. That sometimes Christians forget that. They'll see someone has failed and saying, well, God can never use them anymore. They shouldn't be able to do anything anymore. God can use our failure. That's what Christianity is all about. Saving and redeeming and restoring sinners. And then the last part here, going all the way back to the bottom of the article. It is only because some made an existential decision to trample on the fumée, despite their belief that action was gravely sinful, that Christianity in Japan was able to survive. All right, a powerful reminder of a story that many may not even be familiar with, of what happened in Japan, what happened in Nagasaki. It's sad that it appears most did trample on the face of Jesus, and a few did not. What we should do with this story is a couple of things. Number one, be thankful wherever you live. If you live in a country where you have freedom to worship and you have freedom, use that freedom. Show up to church. Teach the Bible. Study the Bible. Use that freedom. Don't waste it, all right? Be thankful for it. 2, it's just an exercise in challenging ourselves. How committed would I be if I faced this situation? How committed would I be? And a third thought that comes to mind considering this article, and I think this is very important, is I need to consider my commitment and how I live. Not trying to consider my commitment and what I would do if I was faced with a decision, renounce your faith or die, but consider my commitment when I wake up tomorrow on Monday. How am I going to live my life, for self or for Christ? And then I think there's a very hopeful message at the end of this. That we have a God who came to this earth, took upon human flesh to suffer and to die to save sinners. And that our God is a God of forgiveness, a God of mercy, a God that can restore us, a God that can use us no matter how bad we fall. Now, yes, we need repentance. Yes, sometimes there's consequences and discipline we have to face. But we never want to forget that no matter, even if we've trampled on the face of Christ with our feet, that we have a God who can save us, restore us, forgive us, and use us again. David committed horrible sins. He's used to write most of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. Solomon committed some really messed up, he turned his heart from the true God to idolatry because of all of his wives. Well, we have the book of Proverbs and Song of Solomon, and we have Ecclesiastes, we have his writings. We have many men who fell greatly, but God used mightily, because it's about God, it's not about us. That doesn't excuse our sin, but it's just a reminder that God can use us despite our failures. All right, I'll stop right there. So I wanted to share this story as I read the news story and I saved it because I'm like, well, I'll talk about it later. And then I pulled up at the church building, and when I walked around the corner and opened the door, it just hit me. Man, I have freedom. And I just read a story about people who didn't. So I thought I would pull up the story and, well, share it with you as I get ready for the Sunday evening service. All right, everyone, have a great day, great evening. Whenever you hear this, thank you for listening. Make sure you take a few minutes. If you're hearing this is not a live broadcast. If you hear this episode, wherever you may hear it, please take a few moments, go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, download the Spreaker app. That's Spreaker, Spreaker. Once you download the Spreaker app, look for us by doing a search for VBC, which stands for Victory Baptist Church, VBC. and look for all of our podcasts, all of our episodes, all of our sermons. Wherever you're hearing us, you're probably not getting everything. So if you would like everything, get the Spreaker app. All right, everyone have a great day. And if you are a Christian, Thanksgiving is fast approaching. Spend some time thankful for the freedoms that we do have. And let's do everything we can to defend those freedoms, not just for us, but for everyone. And let's pray that we do not face a situation that we just read about. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless.